discussion. Some of it involves some difficult decisions, but we said we would come back to the council in September. So that's what we're doing. Now, what we anticipate is tonight's discussion to get some feedback from you of ways to go, additional research, and then to have another follow-up meeting that's likely within the next 60 days where we also invite the budget committee back to, and the information that we sent to you before the meeting, and we know it's not meant to be a big, long contemplating that. We've sent that out to the budget committee, and before the next meeting, we anticipate doing some scenarios based on the discussion that we have tonight. We have two topics. The first one will take the majority of it, and if we don't get to the second one, we will follow up on it. The first one is to look at the general fund budget and where we are of the gap, and how might we close that gap, and when will we do it. The second one is a update of where we are on the communications, and this is what started out about 3.5, well, it started out a lot more, but 3.5 million to upgrade our radios, our antenna system, and the dispatch center. And how are we going to fund that? What are the ideas? Part of your discussion, which is why this is the second topic tonight, part of your discussion on the general fund and different funding sources may very well inform your decisions that you make on the communication. But we'll give you an update on that. And then as we go tonight, the way that we're proposing to talk about this is Matt doing a closeout of last year's budget. Where did we finally end up? So where does that get us with ending fund balances, and what did we learn a little bit on that part? And then looking at to, again, introduce ideas and get feedback. You do not make decisions tonight, as you know, but really emphasizing that of looking at new revenue streams that are out there. Good news is there are some that you don't even have to take council action on. But since the budget process, some new state revenues are available, and we know that, and we'll report to you on that tonight. Then we'll talk about this gap itself, of how much it is, and we'll present possible options. And it could be all or none of these, or you have other ideas of what we should explore, but all those will require ultimately council action of those. And it'll also be where we bring the budget committee back. And our idea is to hear about your opinions on both new revenue sources that are out there and potential cuts to our existing budget. And so our strategy, or our hope, is to understand what your preferences are and then return with specific scenarios. There might be 5 or 6 different scenarios. It might mix cuts with different revenues, but we'll bring that back to your next session in this fall. So we'll see how this goes, and I know Matt was talking to Sue about what work sessions are available October, November, or December. And then all this is to cover discussions before we get into the formal budget process, and that really begins for the council and staff in January, both with, and a little bit different because we're doing goal priorities tonight, but of revisiting that and make sure that we understand where you're at on your priorities, which then translates into budget. And then during January, each of the departments work on hearing where the priorities are, looking at the money they have, getting preliminary revenue estimates from Matt, and then putting budget proposals that come together. And then the formal process with you and the budget committee happens in April of the year. So this is 10 months out, but we think that, we know that it's going to take that long to come up with the solution. So if there's anything else you want covered tonight, we can. But other than that, we're going to start in, and Matt will start in where we ended up last year, and what are some new revenues that have been identified.
Thanks, Joe. Before we jump into the numbers, I want to remind you that in Granicus, this PowerPoint presentation updated is accessible there, even though I've presented it, emailed it via as a PDF document, so you can find it there. So I guess just to begin, hopefully everybody understands the numbers on these two slides. We're really looking at these two types of numbers as benchmarks, the ending fund balance at the end of any fiscal year, and then the structural deficit, which the ending fund balance for the general fund, again, this was as we projected it back in April. We continue to sharpen numbers and modify the model, but and we have numbers further out, but we're focusing really just on the 18-19 year tonight. But if you recall back,
This is projected for 2019.
right,
Thank you.
right.
Follow on.
Follow on?
$1,273, the structural deficit. Do you subtract the 470 from the anticipated ending fund balance? Does that give you a real number, or are these two separate categories?
Two separate categories, yeah. The structural we just actually,
Well.
We just
I
reduced
hope you
the
have to change, young man.
the ending fund balance is now $469,999. So keep it rolling. No, the ending fund balance is basically where we anticipate ending up. The structural deficit tells us at what pace we're going up or down in that ending fund balance, basically. If we had a $0 structural deficit, that'd say, hey, we're bringing in enough to spend our current year dollars, and our ending fund balance would be the same as at the beginning of the year, or at the end of the year as it was at the beginning of the year. So they're really kind of unrelated numbers. I wouldn't say that you can subtract one from the other and get anywhere meaningful. So the structural deficit, like I said, is current year's revenues minus current year's expenditures. So ideally, we look at both of those numbers because one indicates where we're at today as of a marked time, say June 30, 2019. The other is how fast or how are we getting to where we anticipate going. So the anticipated events not requiring action, as Joe mentioned, there's a couple things that we anticipate having happen in a good way. We are tightening up the numbers for the June 30 ending fund balance, July 1st beginning fund balance as we speak, and we're actually, with the course of sharpening up our audit and those sorts of things, we're actually getting these numbers faster. So as of today, the general fund ending fund balance is anticipated to be $255,000 higher than what we anticipated during the budget process. And why is that? Some of it is additional revenue. Majority of it is expenses not gone out. Some of that is vacant positions that are to be filled. And again, some of that is for example, property tax revenue came in I think a little bit higher than what we anticipated. So the next line down, as Joe mentioned, we're talking about the general fund tonight, but there is one fund, the Administrative Support Services Fund, that represents departments that would otherwise be in the general fund if not for the way we structure it. Things like your city administration, your finance, your legal, those are all funds that, those are all departments that would otherwise be in the general fund. So the July 1st, 2017 beginning fund balance for the Administrative Support Services Fund is about $70,000 higher than we anticipated. Why is that important? Well, the general fund contributes to the operations of the Administrative Support Services Fund. So we try and keep the Administrative Support Services beginning fund balance at a pretty fixed 5%. If there's a surplus in that fund, that can represent a credit to the funds that gave initially to that Administrative Support Services Fund. So, for example, we charge court, police, library, planning, we charge them a fee to help support Truman's work, my work, Joe's work, etc. Well, if our beginning fund balance in that fund is greater than what it needs to be, it's kind of like a kicker gets. I'll use the analogy of a kicker. The estimates were better than. I mean, the results were better than the estimate. So hey, we can give a portion back to those funds. In the past, we generally haven't done that immediately. The higher fund balance gets rolled into the computation for the next year's fees. So there's a little bit of a delay. We're not saying that we're making a choice on that tonight. We're just saying that, hey, this is a source of funds that looks like it could help the general fund and other funds that contribute. So, and that 70,000 on that number is approximately what the general fund's portion of that higher fund balance would look like. You'll get a full report of where the ending fund balances are for all the funds as we get closer to wrapping up the audit and presenting that to you formally. The next bullet down, the state distribution of shared medical revenues. As you know, the city has a local marijuana tax. The state also has a tax. And as the state has been working with the Oregon Liquor Control Commission and ramping up their program, they are now at the point where they're ready to distribute the city's shared portion of their tax. And from January 16 through June of 17 is a year and a half, and they haven't told us exact numbers yet, but they've estimated it's very similar to our amount that we would have gotten from a cigarette tax. And so that $45,000 represents a lump sum that we anticipate getting in September of 2017. The second bullet down represents what we think might be the ongoing stream of revenue that, again, we didn't put into the budget because it was unknown at the time. Based on the cigarette tax similarity, we think that we might get about $28,000 a year, both in 17-18 and 18-19. And that's the scope of time that we have here. So that money would be a positive to the general fund.
Any questions?
Yeah, any questions on that slide? Go ahead.
Yes, I have.
Councilor Corey?
Yes. The question would be, now we had an ending fund balance in the budget. These numbers here, if they come to fruition, if they're correct, then they would add to the beginning fund balance or ending fund balance for this year, beginning fund balance next year. Is that right?
Right.
We're not going to be spending the dollars. In other words, we're going to be able to put some back in reserve money.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Continue.
Mayor, one of the things that this also becomes important to be thinking about is that we're going to be using this tool that's our 5-year plan on purpose, and in some solution as we come up, there may very well be a timing. So, for example, one of the things you're going to see here in a few minutes is if you do X, then the deficit is wiped out in 1 year. Okay, that's one option. You'll see it could be a little difficult to fathom that. But what we want to do is look at the long term, and what we'll always present to you is that we're not uncomfortable presenting something that says we may not have closed the whole gap in 1 year and recommend it. You'll decide if you like the strategy, but always going from, hey, if it's this big, we want to shrink it over time. So that's where this money becomes important, because right now what we're doing is that we took from our reserves to pay for ongoing operations. So we created this. And so it's not like, okay, here's additional money, we'll spend it. There may very well be a strategy that says, in this year, the gap is this big. In the next year, it's this big. And the next year, it's here. And we're going to talk about a stream also of revenues over that 5-year period, and some that are not here. And we're going to talk about that. So that's why this becomes important.
Continue.
Why don't you do the first one and I'll do
Okay.
the second one.
Okay. So the local option levy is a vehicle where cities can tax above and beyond their permanent limit. Most of you are familiar with that. The city currently does not have a local option levy. A lot of times you'll see those for public safety types of things like police or fire. What we did here was what Joe asked me to prepare, and this is an option, would be, hey, what's the math behind if we were to completely wipe out our structural deficit with a local option levy? So,
I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
Local office levy, does it have a sunset on it?
yeah, And I don't know if
5
they're
years, I think.
5 years or 10,
I think it's
Yeah.
fine.
So can it be renewed?
yes,
Thank you.
by vote, yes. So what we've used here is essentially our projection for what the taxable assessed value would be looking forward, and then what tax rate would have to be used to generate approximately 1.28 million. And there are some things that pose as risks for local option levies, such as compression. And currently, the city doesn't experience any compression, but compression is essentially when all the taxing districts in a certain area reach above and beyond the legal limit of $5 and $10, et cetera. Local option levies are the first to experience compression, and so they're reduced in order to reach those maximum limits. So we haven't done the analysis on what the impact for compression would be on a local option levy. The number here assumes zero compression and then uses the fact that we typically get about 93 cents on the dollar collections in our first year, as we do with our permanent rate.
So some of the significance, as you already figured out, with the local option levy is it says, go back to the voters. And if we make a strong enough case, will they accept the idea of going and paying for more funds? And there would obviously be a message and stuff. I think that clearly, and we will talk about that in a little more detail, we would make the argument of these funds would go towards public safety. So we'll show what the difference is of all the revenues that right now are associated with public safety versus what's being made up in property taxes. And so this would, I think, would be the most successful and most closely aligned with here's what the needs are and here's the fee. Now, some of the challenge with this also has to do with timing. So if, we've already put onto the budget doing a charter amendment where $1.88 would be given back to it. Well, the election occurs, but it doesn't happen the moment after the election. It goes into the next budget cycle. So what could happen is that here's a charter amendment that says take $1.88, and then under one scenario, it would be, now voters, can we have 71 cents back? I'll leave that to you of some of the challenges that explaining of what that happens. But the first goal here is to say there is a legal way of going back to voters and saying we would like more funds. Unlike the permanent tax rate, this does have a limit of how many years, basically sunsets out.
Clarification, if I
Yeah.
may.
Yep.
When we talk about going to the voters for any piece of that under levy, that's not a local option levy. Is that correct?
Well, I'm using the words local option levy. You can use the same discussion of if you have $1. This, I think, made it more understandable.
Thank you.
Yeah, but yes, it's same process. If you go back to the voters. Now, what you're talking about very easily, and we haven't researched the legality of this, but under that situation, you probably would not have the compression threat. Right now, what we're saying is we don't believe we're in a compression threat. You'd still end up going back to the voters and asking for it. But since that was part of our tax rate right down, we may not have, but we don't know that answer. And that's more for us to research.
I got,
Yes, Councilor Corey.
now, the scenario, local option levy, all going to public safety. We are not in that large of a deficit in public safety, but you're saying you're going to put it into public safety. So what is that in technical terms? We're freeing up money from public safety that we can use in the general fund then, or another fund? Or I'm not understanding why we all of a sudden need over $1 million for public safety, for example. We
need in the general fund the $1.2 million. the general fund is made up with a number of different departments and functions. The largest of those is the police department. So right now, we're using, and we were going to be prepared at a subsequent meeting, but we can tell you about, so what we've done is we looked at what are all the different revenues that have come in that are specifically dedicated to police or communications, and then look at the size of, and these are in two different funds, but it is easy to understand that the money that comes in for communications and two police officers over there is separate, so revenues and expenditures equal. So what we're talking about is the police expenditures in the general fund over and above, for example, fines that we bring in. How much is currently being used in property tax? And so that's what, if I was making an argument to somebody saying, if we need additional funds, now somebody could say, well, cut something. You know, it's not police that we need to reduce the expenditures on, something else, and if you reduce those things that might not be police, you'll reduce that structural deficit. Clearly, you can do that, and we're going to talk about those real specific. But that's why just I think an argument about if we go to ask the voters for money to show what's the amount of revenues that we have coming in now, exclusive of property tax, and would they be willing to put more funds into it? And that really leads, or the best example of that is the next item on the list. So the first one talks about going.
Just a moment, please.
Sorry.
Councilor McKinney.
So when you use the word public safety, that's not what you meant.
I mean
Our
police.
public safety fee is for police. If the annexation is successful, there won't be any money designated to fire department, ambulance, or whatever.
Correct.
This is $1.2 million in relationship to the police department, a change from $3 to $15.
Well, first and foremost, we're talking about general fund total of revenues and expenditures aren't meeting. Police is the single largest item in that. And so wherever you make up the deficit, you can say it goes to police, or you could go say it goes to city manager's salary, if we made that much. I mean, you can identify it with any of the items, and that changes the narrative. When don't worry, I don't make that deficit. So even getting rid of me, and and we'll talk about personnel because it does become important. But the next item, which is important, that's part of this conversation, is that we have two fees that are one towards, and not every city has this. One's towards our communications officer, and one is our police officer. So. And again, we'll tag team on this.
In our discussion, though, you were talking about police from the $3 to the $15.
Yes. So the first one, if the voters ever approved it and you said it was great and you wanted to close a deficit in 1 year, you'd have 71 cents, and that would close that gap. Okay, so you just kind of, so you know that. And it's a large number, and you have to go back to the voters and all that, and it has the issues of related to giving back money from that same fund. The second one is a fund that we charge that specifically goes to fund.
Clarification, if I may. The 1.279, 1.28, you're looking at that as a 1 year? Or is an ongoing?
It's ongoing. The kinds of monies that we're talking about are.
So in perpetuity,
Yes.
if you wish. Thank you.
Yes.
71 cents per thousand into perpetuity.
It is, with this caveat. As we go through these options, we're now going to go to a 5-year plan. And there are other revenues that will come in over a 5-year period that either suggests that this gap does not have to be closed in 1 year and that it can come down. And here's two examples of that. One example is if the charter amendment goes through, what that provides for, the annexation provides that not in the first year, but in the second year, an option for the council will be to take that 3% of the amount that was given back. That's about $133,000. So, first year, that doesn't do any good to say, how does that affect this 1.2 million? But as you look over time, you'll know that at one point, if a council decides, there's another 123,000. So structurally, at that point, well, presumably, you wouldn't need 71 cents in the year that kicks in, the 122 would reduce it. Likewise, you're going to hear, as we go along, what's happening to growth and how that growth relates to, and we're not talking about fees and stuff, because that's one thing in the general fund we'll talk in the budget. But a significant part is our single largest source of money are property taxes. So at a point, and we're going to show you where we see that, there will be a significant change in property tax going up. If there is not a corresponding addition of new staff and people, and at some point that could happen, but if there isn't initially that, then that provides additional revenues. Well, if you're saying 71 fits all the problems, and you start going on, and you get to year 2, 3, 4, and you got additional money, you shouldn't need that much. So that's part of our discussion. We're going to show that over a 5-year. So the next one, and again, and this is really important for Aaron and the graphic and Dave and everything else, is that what we're presenting, I first started by the different options. What if they stood alone and they funded all of it? Well, that isn't necessarily what you'd end up coming back. You might say, I'll take a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And there's also a logical argument to be made that if there is a plan, and if you accept all those assumptions in it, that it doesn't have to be closed in 1 year. But I'm starting with, if you only did one thing, a levy of 71 cents would fill the gap. Now let's go to the second. This is an existing funding source. The first one, we don't have the levy. Well, now we do have a public safety fee right now. And we have 2 fees out there, one for police for patrol and the other side for communications officer. And right now we're talking about police and patrol, because on the other side, our communications budgets, which are in another fund, as are these, they are, the expenditures and the revenues match each other. So right now, we charge the resident $3 per month. It shows up on our municipal service fee statement. Some refer to the sewer statement of $3. If you were going to close the gap, that means all of what's in the general fund, if the fee was increased from $3 to $15, the gap is done. That's showing it all being filled in one single year. It doesn't say anything about subsequent years. Now, as we look at any fee, another part of the discussion will be, if something is presented as a fee, can it also be limited in time? Clearly, the local option levy is. It's voted, it's 5 years. With other fees, there can be, as part of a council action, as part of a strategy, things like sunset clauses. So there might be, you can do all kinds of things. This is showing in 1 year, filling it all with that fee. But there can be things that fees are graduated, they come in, and the amount collected does differ or increase with the number of people that are in the town that are paying it. So we are not in a static environment or one that's going down. We have additional people that are coming into the community, which in turn brings in new revenues on all of our services, and also including on the public safety fee. So we have projections of what that might look at. But, for example, there might be something like this. Say, well, that fee's too high, and just if we were just dealing with that one. So I want to bring it in over a period of years, and I might bring in so much in this year, so much in that year, so much in this year, that's combined with additional revenues that might be come in, and you might say, and I'm going to put a sunset clause, one thing might be, which is pretty severe, saying every year the council has to renew this fee. Just in speaking of that, I would probably not recommend that to you because of the budget volatility of not knowing from one year to the other, employees and everything else. But there is a rationale that it's sometime 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years that it says this sunsets. That addresses, sometimes a concern that once a tax is imposed, it never goes away. Now, our record most recently is that we have had fees or taxes that were put in place. For example, the fire equipment fee, that went away. And that is no longer collected. So it kind of runs counter to the argument of, here's a fee and it never goes away. It went away. It served its purposes and it's gone. So if you were to fund everything, $1,200,000 would be increasing the fees. Now the next one isn't really a new revenue source, but I wanted to bring this up for two reasons. One, it's connected to public safety, police, and the other one is you're scheduled in October to have a joint work session with school board. And so one of the things that we do specifically, and I think uniformly, we like having a police officer in the schools. And it's common among communities. There is no set formula for how much each side contributes. Many of the SROs started as part of a grant program from the Department of Justice, and there were cost-sharing formulas for how much a city would kick in, how much a school district, and it was typically done over a 5-year period. But where we're at now is that we have a school resource officer there, and approximately $110,000 in expenses. It actually depends on which officers assigned there. But then we're receiving from the school district, which has not changed for quite a while, and the chief is back there, I think, he'd tell us when exactly went in, but it's about $35,000. So I think it is, and we have asked for the last several years that the school district consider raising that amount of money in revenues. Part of your overall discussion might be that could there be a greater participation from the school district as an ask? And we have asked that, but maybe in the joint meeting it comes up. An option, there's pros and cons anytime you start talking about cuts and what the level of service, but you could theoretically reduce that police officer. Since there's no money coming in, a whole position is cut. Well, then what do you save? You save the difference between the $100,000 in expense, and then we wouldn't be getting revenues. So about that $65,000. That's out there. It's not recommended. It's one more thing for you to hear in your toolbox as we talk about it.
Councilman McKinney.
Anytime you can jump in.
This SRO for the school district, they've been asked how many years to elevate that to something that reflects more of the
Okay.
110,000.
You want to come on up? You can come up and then just answer any of those.
Brian Casey, Chief of Police. It's been a couple of years, I think we've had the discussion with the school district concerning increasing those fees.
And the results have been
Well, we haven't seen it
no
yet.
increase. Okay. A question for Jay Harris. The consideration for the school district in terms of the TUF is what? Thank you, Brian.
Jay Harris, Public Works Director. The TUF is based per student And then there was a allowance in the ordinance that you adopted to cut that fee in half. And my recollection is the total the school district pays a year, Matt, you might help me here, was somewhere around, is under $20,000 total. I can look that up, and I can get you back to you an exact amount.
So the point is that there was consideration given to the school district
There
regarding
was.
the TUF. And you think that that amount is roughly 120,000?
No, it's somewhere around, if I remember correctly, the total was $36,000 a year, and we divided that by 2.
So, Joe, the school district is a separate taxing entity, correct? Like the Parks and Recreation here. So, in order for us to provide that officer, we subsidize that officer at the high school.
Well, I think you can call it subsidy. Someone else would say you're taking part of your force and putting it there. And because of all of the kind of preemptive things that happen by having an officer there, people can say, gosh, by having him there versus on the streets someplace, you're maybe catching crimes before they happen because a lot of them may be in youth and all that. So I don't want to use the word subsidy in this case. That seems a little,
Sounds harsh.
well, it could be. But we'll say,
In our conversations, that police officer is available to do some other things. Brian, do you want to come to the bench? All right, but my point is that when we're talking about separate wallets and separate needs and separate urgencies, is that, if it sounds like a subsidy, maybe it is. But Brian, share with me what
Well, first of all,
What happens?
it's not a subsidy. We have a budget that funds the police department, and then we assign those officers to positions that we deem necessary. Now, I wouldn't cut this position because you're going to lose $35,000 funding from the school district. You'd be better off just cutting a regular position. And then we keep the school resource officer. That'd be my recommendation anyway. So
is the first recommendation is that they step up to the 110,000?
we're trying not to make recommendations tonight. We're trying not to move too quickly to finding solutions. That's why this is informal like this, to just say, here are some of the pieces for you to consider. Now, no problem with coming back of options or things for us to research, including what I said our next goal would be to do scenarios that might say, might be a cut. It might be a mixture of these things, but we're not making a recommendation to you tonight.
Councilor Essen?
Would you like to come up and sit at one of these chairs here?
no, I'm fine, thanks.
We'll let you, that way you don't have to run back and forth.
Thanks.
So in looking at different kinds of sources of funding, the next one is a little different, and there's still some legal research that has to be done. But one of the sources of money to the city in the general fund is that we charge franchise fees to different utilities. So electric utility, PGE, we collect money for them. The rationale for that is that the city has basically a resource, our land, for example, and they're in that land. And as part of compensation for them being there is that they pay us a fee of franchise. Now, there has not been done, the amount that we charge on our other utilities are typically set by the legislature, and we're at the max of what we can charge. And most communities are like that. Now, what's not true of every city is that we have a water utility, so we run our water. There's other communities right near us that they get their water from somebody else. And so it's like an outside, again, franchise and a fee that gets charged to them. We also have a sewer. Not everyone has a sewer plant. And we also have a utility that's stormwater. So those legislatively, or with ORS, do not have a restriction on the maximum amount that can be charged for that utility, for the use of it. There are not many. There's a handful, probably 6 or 7, that are above a 6% charge on the utility, where they own it, where they run that utility, that they collect a higher utility. So on the face, it's a potential source of money. However, the other part of that, like anything that we would do in fees for water bills, sewer bills, is that we also have another process of the rate review. And so the rate review, which works for you, here's rationales for the amount that our water bills, sewer bills, and I guess they do stormwater too, Jay?
Yeah.
But, sorry, and storm. And what we try, not what we do, is we say, this is the service provided and it costs this amount of money. So, yes, there are some communities that have higher fees. Logically, we'd also have to make an argument that says, for the fee that would be charged, what service is that provided? How's that compared to others? And is that reasonable? So that would be another process that would be here. Now, one other way of, or another way of distributing costs in a city, it's more typical in a county, but it does happen in cities, is that if there, and remember, this discussion is about the general fund. And these franchise utilities come to the general fund for the general operation of the government. Well, there are places, we right now have, say, a competitive advantage of the cost of our development fees is significantly lower than a lot of the communities around us. One thing that a couple of communities, and probably the most visible example is Washington County, that their philosophy, which mirrors ours to an extent, says that the operations like their building department or their development services, that they are enterprises in themselves. They're a business. And so if their costs for personnel and all the benefits and everything else is this amount, their cost of their computer system is this, their cost of the facility they're in is this, all those costs are aggregated and then they assign a fee to them. Now, sometimes governments, for all kinds of reasons, councils and commissions will say, well, I want development to occur and I want to be the most competitive, and even if my costs are that high, I will subsidize or not charge it, and it comes out of the general fund. One argument or one discussion that we're having is that on those things that are enterprise funds for us, like the development, could be also engineering, for example, we share their costs and they're assigned to many of our inner funds. That's why when he was talking about, well, it's this admin fund, how does that come out? Well, the cost of support services spread about there. One thing that we probably do not do as aggressively as some other communities is doing things like, if engineering takes up 1,000 square feet in City Hall, and if City Hall was purchased or belongs to the general fund, they're the landlord. So an argument can be made, and this is what Washington County does, it says, just like if we went to the outside and rented a building to put our engineering department, we're renting space with all the triple net, with all of the issues about utilities and taxes rolled into that. Ours does not go through that regimen. That, if we go down that road, that's probably how this might be modified some, where we do more numbers of saying, and we don't have a lot, but how would, for example, community development and engineering, how would they pay for city hall costs. And then that would be reflected as a fee onto development permits or possibly water and sewer bills. More work to still be done, but that's out there. Then, one that we have already had as a discussion, and the council has set the policy already for us. So the guidance to us in this year, and we're still operating on that, is that we wish to operate our own dispatch. And we had a discussion, or you had a discussion a while back that said if dispatch was transferred to somebody else, it was outsourced to like WACA. So one is assuming that we stay in the same communication system that we have. And so that's WACA, and just say that we would not have dispatchers. And we did two analyses. One is that if the dispatch left and was contracted out, there would be a certain amount of savings, wouldn't plan for people. But right now, and we're a little bit different than other places, and it's good, is that our police officers can count on dispatch for doing certain services for them. Some of them are things like checking on warrants, keeping track, that other communities don't have. So in the earlier discussions, which I will provide you, it's on the record, but we'll send it to you. So if the graphic wanted, they could look up past discussions. But what happened is we said, well, if we want to keep the same level of service to the officers, we'll add 2 records clerks. We'll add them. So they're in the evenings to do that work. With that scenario, the savings estimated was $250,000 a year if we eliminated that and added 2. If we didn't have those 2 records clerks, and they were, they were part-time and they were working in some hours, some other, you could probably add another $75,000. So if our officers did not have exactly the same levels they have now, but similar to what other agencies our size are, like a Sherwood or Tualatin, then there'd be a savings of $300,000. We're not making recommendations tonight. It's there as that would require action. It would change our policy discussion, so that's there for yours. Then another one that I'm not prepared to go into a total, can be part of the next follow-up, is that the city owns a animal shelter, and it's dedicated. And you know how that happened? That there was a community fundraiser, and the money was combined with some city funds, and we bought a building, and we have on a contract which is being up for renewal June of this next year, so it'll be part of this budget. We have a building, and it's roughly estimated at a value of about $1 million. Not moving to any recommendations. This is just information that you have an asset that we would be there. If there was ever a recommendation, the recommendation would never be that it would leave, at least from staff, you get to make that decision, but we would never recommend that it not be an animal shelter. And likely, if there was ever any kind of a disposition, that there would be some kind of a public process of preserving or transferring that money that came from a community fundraising effort to whoever is the successor at running animals. So if there was $500,000 raised from the community, we would never think about that as a possible one source of money for something. We would recommend that that goes back to whoever or whatever might provide animal shelter services. This will lead to a later discussion, but it's there just for information that we know of. How much time do we got? 10 minutes. We got 10 minutes. Is there any question on those? And particularly next time you come back, I'd like to know this about any of those. Okay.
Continue.
Okay, then the next part of it, these are also options, and they would require council. So one of the things is that we've been talking about revenues. And with the one exception of that there might be a change in the police officer, we haven't been talking about cuts and things like that. One thing that has been part of kind of an ongoing discussion, public discussion, is that a year ago we added some new positions to the city budget. Now, those positions are not all general fund positions. They typically have one portion of their salary comes general fund, it might be a one utility, it might be community development. But in the 5 FTEs, which means 6 bodies and some either full-time or part-time, the portion that's charged to the general fund is $295,000. Now, there is no recommendation about any of the cuts, but there had been discussion about what did we add a couple of years ago? That's the total amount. And yes, we have the positions and where they are and other things. And we'll go later with some discussions that if we ever got to that point of what might happen to those people.
Counselor Johnson?
I'm a little confused. I vividly remember the discussion we had around these 5 positions, and at the time I directly asked staff, I don't really want to add 5 positions if we don't have a recurring revenue source to fund those 5 positions, because I felt it wasn't fair to hire 5 people, or 6 people in this case, and then turn around in a year or two, lay them all off. And I was assured that everything's going to be fine, and my question to staff is, what happened? Because that was told to us back in 16, 17, before I was on council and I was on budget committee, and now here we are. So I'm just curious.
Go ahead.
So at the next gathering we have, we'll provide that same memos that came from the first part of the rationale, and we'll show you what revenues have increased. I'll give you one example, and that's, so we're not going to that point of recommendation. But, for example, planner, okay? One of the positions that was added was a planner. And if, just by your own knowledge and stuff, we know that we're in a growth spurt right now. Our planning fees have I don't want to say skyrocketed, but they've increased significantly. And so a argument, for example, can be if a planner's not there, they can't process the permits. They don't process the permits, we don't get revenues. We'll go back through for each of the positions to provide you that. So what revenues increased, and are they associated with these positions? So we'll do that.
Follow on, Counselor.
What portion of those fees year-to-date, percentage-wise, are paying for those 5 increased personnel? I mean, are we almost there? My question refers to the sustainability of these 5 positions. Are the fees that we're charging now and the boon that we're experiencing, is that providing half of the money that we need, 75% of the money, or is there an educated guess that you're willing to throw out?
I don't want to make an educated guess because it wouldn't be educated. So we'll do the research on it. We'll see what was the original discussion about those positions, because there'll be a fiscal impact of that, and we'll present that back. That doesn't have to wait until the next time we gather, but we'll provide that information, and it will be public information for anyone that wants it to. So, now, again, we're not making any recommendations today. We're just talking about different kinds of options. One that seems to come up in public discussion is that how much do public employees pay for their health contribution? Now, recognizing this, again, we're talking about the general fund, and a significant number of our employees are not in the general fund. They're in these special utility funds. And so one discussion that we'll have, if you like more information, and we have more information to say, if fees were increased, for example, with employees, those are all tied also, some of ours to labor contracts would have to be negotiated, but if we were to increase the fees, how much could that be? How much if it's a 5% increase, 10%, 1,000%, all different levels, and we'll bring that back the next time we get together if you say, yeah, I'd like that kind of information. Then can you explain the City Hall fee of what it is?
Yeah, sure. The City Hall fee is actually charged through the Community Development Department, and it is used to pay a portion of debt for the City Hall remodel that occurred back in the late 90s, I think 1999. That currently brings in about $90,000. Not enough to completely pay the debt service, but a portion of that City Hall fee fund had a large beginning fund balance due to some historical revenue back in the early 2000s.
Clarification on this. So
Yeah, sure.
that I'm in step with you. The remodeling of the City Hall, was that not a bonded indebtedness?
That's correct. Yeah.
And I thought the bond had been serviced.
No, not the City Hall one. The two that had just recently been serviced was the 1997 and 1998 police and fire facility. Those were completed,
So the
basically.
City Hall bond is still yet to be completely,
Right, about 2019 is when we see the last payment come
Thank you.
through. Yeah. So what this is basically saying is that, okay, if we, as that obligation goes away, potentially the opportunity to repurpose that fee could be there. You would have to have the justification for that fee, but currently it brings in about $90,000. So typically when you see fees sunset, for example, like the mayor mentioned with the property tax for the facilities bonds, strategically a lot of cities will not let those lapse because it's harder to go back and, re-ask for that when someone's used to it. So that's the purpose of that City Hall fee.
So recognizing that we have 2 minutes before your regular council meeting comes in, we'll work with the mayor and council president to see, even before this, how we can get information out. The other stuff would be important for us to hear tonight is that, and we have this, is that one of the things that happens over time is that we know how many homes and how many businesses are already permitted and likely to be permitted. And what we've done with the tool is that we've developed a matrix that says if these are developed at a particular price point at the tax rate of $250, which we anticipate after the election, if it goes that way, will generate X amount, millions of property tax dollars. And that becomes important of when we think it comes online, when it's available to us, and how much that is. So the next time we gather, we will present that or figure out in between to get that information to do it. And one of the things also with future development and in our downtown plan and our economic development plan, specifically, there's calls for 2 hotels in the downtown area, one by the flagpole and one out in the area near Chehalem Mill. One thing that's unique about hotels is that they collect motel-hotel tax, and that a significant portion of that comes for money to the general fund to play for things like police, fire, and general government. For example, and right now, at various stages, there's from maybe a 20% likelihood to, say, a 75% likelihood. There's 4 different hotels that are looking in our city and we're talking to, and they are of different size. And if you count what might come in the waterfront, you could say 5. But for example, if you had a hotel of 60 rooms, just as one, that would generate $29,000 that would go into the general fund. So that will also be part of the discussion. We get Doug Rucks back up here and say, here's where development are, don't count on it until it happens, what can we count on? And we'll be prepared to go with that as we start looking at what happens in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I think tonight, this first start, it is meant to be this casual or informal, not moving to decisions, and we'll work with the mayor and council president, figure out, hey, even before coming a work session, should we be putting some information out? We're looking for a study session. Did you find a time that worked out? So we're working to see, I know that there's one, at least one, in December that's available for it, but we'll see how, you have 2 study sessions already scheduled out, one with CPRD and one with the school district, so we'll figure out where the other ones to get you information. If you have other questions about this or anything else there, if you send them to me, then we'll try to answer them even before we get to that.
I have one quick question.
Mr. Mayor, so
Councilor McKay?
The figures that you discussed with us tonight, are they predicated on the successful charter amendment at $2.50 per thousand? Or are they based upon another dollar amount per
no,
thousand?
we're using, for purposes of this, the charter amendment goes through and it's 250 that we're working on. Yes.
Any further questions? I have one that I wanted to follow up on, and you presented it here. Under your property tax assumptions, Matt, you have a 4.3 growth in assessed valuation. Is that what you're saying it's going to be in the future, or is that what we're looking at in the next biennium, the next annual area? What is your 4.3 growth?
We have used that for, I believe, the last 2 budget cycles, and then in the long-range plan, I've used that also for 18-19. And the model that I have allows me to change that percentage for any given year I want. What we're going to do to sharpen that number is look at how much of our property taxes is hitting that maximum 3%, and then how much is attributable to growth, so that we can sharpen that 4.3. I will tell you, looking backwards over the last 3, 4, 5 years, I've seen it up as high as 5.2% increase in the tax assessed value. So that 4.3 isn't a scientific number. It's a conservative number based on a little bit of last several years'
Thank you.
activity.
Councilor Johnson?
Just a real quick one. If TVF&R annexation doesn't pass, and therefore the charter amendment doesn't go through, we'd still be facing the systemic problem with the general fund. Is that correct?
A whole different dynamic, because we have an estimate of what it would cost to reconstitute.
Mhm.
This structural deficit is assuming that $1.88 is gone. So then that's back in play, and then you have to figure out how much does the fire department cost, and what do you have after you do that? That's a different discussion.
But this chunk of the budget, follow on, if I might,
Follow on?
this chunk of the budget does not, the systemic issues with the general fund, like you've been talking about, that doesn't change whether, if we went back 2 years ago and we had the fire department at current staffing levels and we never went to TVF&R, we'd still be facing this issue. Is that's probably the better question.
Not necessarily, but we're not talking apples to apples, because we're talking about a different service level from where we were 2 years ago to where we are now. This assumes a service level that has all the fire needs done. Where we were at before, we might have more money that could keep us at basically revenues, expenditures the same, but we had a different service level. We knew that wasn't sustainable when you go out 1, 2, or 3 years, because we didn't have the money to pay for the equipment. We haven't done the what if. Well, if we would have stayed and then added more people, that would have been a decision, and bought new fire equipment, would we have had a deficit? Maybe. Then we'd be discussing these kinds of issues to raise that. What we do have is we've estimated how much a fire department will cost if we do not annex and we keep the fire department. In that case, we keep the $1.88, and then you say, okay, what level do you want your fire department? Do you want it the same level as it is? Do you want it something less?
Okay,
We
thanks.
can do those. We can talk about those if we get to that, yeah.
Okay, great.
Any other comments? Anything further that you have to offer this evening? Thank you for the presentation. I don't know that I appreciate all the information, but we appreciate the insights that you've shared with us. Thank you very much. And with that, unless there's something further to come before us, we're going to close the work session, and we will reconvene at approximately 7:15.
I'm sad now.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call to order the city business session for the Newburgh City Council for September 5, 2017. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Mayor, all present, duly noted.
Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have the city manager's report, please?
Mayor and Council, Joe Hannon, your city manager. This was emailed to you earlier in the day and then also to both our media representatives. Spent some time working with Matt, as you saw tonight, and the finance staff, working on options and also our 5-year budget model. So we'll be prepared to talk through these, both this budget gap right now, options, and also on the communications upgrade. Also, we have a monthly staff training with all the directors and a few other selected staff for disaster preparedness. You know, it's unfortunately, see all the stuff in Houston in the news, and it just says that we have to be prepared. It won't be for floods likely, but Cascadia or something like that. So we dedicate one of our staff meetings every month, and we go from facility to facility and find out how that, like the water plant, the sewer plant, police department, prepares for disaster and how we can work on a team in doing that. And very shortly, we'll come back and begin to do orientations for council members on that. Also attended the joint intergovernmental meeting with the mayor and the council president and TVFNR and discussed annexation and the other part of that we'll provide shortly about TVFNR's participation in the communication upgrade that we have. And so they have expressed that they will participate in a portion of the funding of the $3.4 million that we're looking at for communications upgrade. I also met with Chief Dyke individually, so working with staff before we got the presentation that made to the IGA with their board chair and one other member. Also accompanied the mayor to Portland, and this was for the governor's signing of the transportation bill. And this was an opportunity for the mayor to thank the different legislators that were there, which is Portland-centric, but really important because funding for the bypass was in the transportation bill, and there's additional funds set aside for cities like us, cities, county, and Newburgh was there. There were not other outlying cities there, but the mayor and some of the members of the bypass committee were also, and I'm sure the mayor will supplement that. We also accompanied the mayor for his talk on the 135th anniversary celebration of the Fernwood Cemetery, where he provided a look at Newburgh today, and we put it on the website for others to read, and I think we emailed it to each of you, I think, and if we don't, we'll do that. But that was juxtapositioned against George Edmondson talking about what Newburgh was at in 1893, and so we're kind of comparing it, fast forwarding to today, and there were some good lessons to be learned with that. Also met with Matt Miller. I sent tonight, and if the press doesn't have it, they should. There's Matt Miller is a real unique architect that has just joined the staff at Newburgh High School, and he's kind of famous for work that he did in North Carolina called Studio H, with taking students and some different projects. We'll be talking about that in more detail at the joint city and board meeting coming up in October. But I sent you a YouTube link that you might really find interesting and exciting. Then we also met with Pastor Case, the mayor. Jay and myself met with Pastor Case and one of their representatives of a disaster preparedness committee at Newburgh Christian. And it appears as though Newburgh Christian is going to be the second of 3 churches that we're looking as pilot churches where we'll enter into a formal agreement with an MOU, pre-position supplies that theirs, and really help us be the way that we would respond and recover from a disaster. So that will come back shortly to council as soon as we get the draft agreement to come back in the MOU between the 2 sides. We also agreed as part of that for the mayor to do a brief video, which we'll do in-house with Rosa, and we may talk a little bit about that in the communications plan of just one function that you would do. And this is kind of an appeal to the different churches to say, look, this is the concept that we're doing. We're reaching out to you, and we would like you to join with other people in your church to get interested and active in emergency preparedness and disaster. Then we also met with the mayor and Councilor Bacon in her other role as a field person for the Ford Institute with an initiative, and probably under council report she'll talk about some efforts that's going on in nonprofit transportation in the town. And then final one is we're working on an issue with the reserves, and so this was a meeting with the reserve coordinator, the chief, finance, attorney, and a member of the foundation to talk about that we have a unique situation where we have a very large reserve force compared to other cities, and they do different things. They work sometimes like tonight, and there he is in the back, protecting the council meeting, and there are other times, and that can be a funded position, paid for it, but the reserves also give a great deal of time in working patrol, and one of them is also here, he's still here, Dave Brooks, our IT director, is also a police reserve. He does that for free. So we're trying to reconcile how do you get paid for the times you work paid, and how do we still recognize when you're not being paid, and what are the legal ramifications. So we're working through that, and that was this week. And that's all, Mr. Mayor.
Any questions or comments for the city manager? None appearing. Councilor Essen.
As I understand it, what you'd like out of tonight's presentation is if we could take a look at the various options, and if we want more information or something we like about some of the options that were given to us, we should bring that to you, and as a matter of fact, that's what you were hoping for. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for the city manager? None appearing. Councilor Essen? None appearing. I have nobody signed up for the general public comments. I do have some people signed up that want to speak to specific agenda items. So with that, I'm going to open and close the public comments period, and we go to the consent calendar. Pleasure of the council.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Aha, Councilor Johnson beat you with his mic off. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the consent calendar. Councilor Johnson. Adopt the consent calendar. Is there any further discussion? None appearing. Do I hear a call for the question? Question's been called for. All in favor of approving the consent calendar signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. None appearing. Consent calendar is adopted. And with that, we will move now to public hearings. And the first one we have is an ordinance 2017-2817, which is an ordinance annexing 24.35 acres of property located at 4020 North College, plus the area of the adjacent rights of right-of-way into the Newburgh city limits, withdrawing it from the Newburgh Rural Fire Protection District and changing the zoning from Yamhill County F10 and PAI to Newburgh R1 and I with a stream corridor overlay. AF10, I'm sorry, County AF10 and PAI Newburgh Rural to Newburgh R1 and I with a stream corridor overlay. And with that, we have, this is a quasi judicial. This is the first reading of this particular ordinance. And I will be asking if there are any abstentions, bias, ex parte contact, conflicts of interest, and objections to jurisdiction. Councilor Johnson?
I did have an ex parte contact. I have a friend who's official at Veritas. Had lunch with them and my wife August, I want to say 24th, and this topic came up. I shut it down very quickly, but it did come up. So just wanted to say that.
Any others? Thank you, I appreciate that. With that, then we will have our legal announcements. City Attorney, please.
Certain announcements are required before the commencement of a quasi-judicial land use hearing. This hearing deals with the land use decision of a zone change and annexation. The announcement required by Oregon Revised Statutes 197.763 is as follows. The applicable substantive criteria for the decision are listed in the staff report, pages 3, specifically recital 4, and beginning on page 54, the criteria listed in Exhibit D. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the criteria described above or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation that you believe applies to this decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes inaction for damages in circuit court. The applicant who has the burden of proof may have at least 7 days after the record is closed to submit final written argument. At the close of testimony portion of the hearing, the applicant will have to decide if the applicant wishes to submit further written argument. Under the ORS 197.763, argument means assertions and analysis regarding the satisfaction or violation of legal standards or policy believed relevant by the proponent to a decision. Argument does not include facts. Evidence means facts, documents, data, or other information offered to demonstrate compliance or noncompliance with the standards believed by the proponent to be relevant to the decision. Any submission by the applicant after the close of the hearing must be limited to argument. If the applicant wishes to make final written argument, no further deliberation shall take place tonight. If the applicant waives that right, the council may proceed with deliberation.
Thank you. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. I'm Brad Allen, an assistant planner with the Community Development Department, and the item you have before you this evening is a request to annex a site which is 24.33 acres to the north of Newburgh. The applicants are North Valley Friends Church and Veritas School. I'll see if we can. Here we are. So the site encompasses 7 lots, 7 different tax lots, like I said, 24.33 acres, And the request, of course, includes changing the zoning from AF10 and PAI, that's a Yamhill County designation, to
Bring the mic just a little bit closer.
Sure.
Please. Thanks, Brad.
the zoning is requested to be changed to I, which is institutional, and R1, low density residential. There's also a stream corridor overlay on the site. The comprehensive plan designation is PQ, which is public, quasi-public, with a stream corridor on part of the site. That's consistent with the request for zoning. Like we mentioned, it's at 4020 North College Street, tax lots 3208-2700, 2701, 2702, 2703, 2800, 2801, and 2802. And the applicable criteria are found in the Newburgh Municipal Code, Chapter 15.250.020 and 030. Here's a map of Newburgh, and you can see it's the site with the blue arrow pointing to it at the very north end. The red line indicates the existing city boundary, and the green line is the urban growth boundary. The first criterion for annexation is that the site proposed for annexation must be within the UGB, the urban growth boundary, and contiguous to the existing city limits, which it is. You can see here the yellow down below, that's currently in the city. And then this is the site here with the proposed zoning. This blue indicates the stream corridor overlay. So it's within the urban growth boundary, that green, and it is contiguous with the existing city limits. Here's a comprehensive plan map that shows PQ, the public quasi-public designation. Here's what the site looked like a little over a year ago. I'd say it looks different today because in the middle, this area that's proposed R1, currently underway, Veritas School has put their modular buildings there, has moved their facilities up to this site here. This is North Valley Friends Church, and there's a few auxiliary buildings. There's a walking path that surrounds the site as a whole. This is the concept development plan that was submitted some time ago for Veritas School, showing the school there in the middle with the ball fields on the northern end, and with the church and the other buildings remaining. A unique element of this site is back in 2003 there was a development agreement between North Valley Friends Church and the city, which allowed for the development of the site for the school, the ball fields, and also a duplex. So one of the elements of the agreement was that they could begin construction, the first phase of construction, before the site had been annexed in, provided that they had filed a request, an application, which they've done. So they currently have a permit from Yamhill County. Development's underway. They've moved the buildings there and done other improvements. Another criterion is the proposed use complies with the comprehensive plan and designation on the comprehensive plan map. As I noted earlier, PQ, public quasi-public, is the comprehensive plan designation, and PQ is set aside in our comprehensive plan. It states used to indicate the location of existing and future schools, public and private, airports, hospitals, continuing care, retirement communities, cemeteries, government centers, other non-park facilities serving major community functions. So it was a known site for the school, hence the PQ designation. So their proposed zoning, the proposed use of the church and the school and the ball fields, they correspond, or they're consistent with the PQ designation and the requested zoning of I, institutional, for the majority of the site, and then the 5-acre lot in the middle, owned by Veritas School, will be R1. The reason for that rather than have it all institutional, is in our municipal code, primary and secondary schools are not a permitted use in the institutional zone, but they are in
Say
residential
that again,
zones.
please.
Primary and secondary schools are not a permitted use in the institutional zone in our municipal code. They are in residential zones, hence the request to have the Veritas site be designated R1.
Thank you.
Another criterion is an adequate level of urban services must be available within 3 years. Sewer, water, and roads, availability of police, fire, parks, and schools. Public utilities have been extended to the site. I know the applicants have been issued a permit to connect to the sanitary sewer system, and upgrades to a booster station, pump station are underway, or will be required to serve the site there, but there have been lines extended to the site. Part of the development agreement does require that further development occur as the area develops, but this first phase, the school and the ball fields, can begin before street improvements are made and utilities are extended through the site, as long as they can be served by the utilities in the next 3 years, which they are able to. So the Planning Commission, their recommendation is to adopt Ordinance 2017-2817, annexing the 24.33 acres of property located at 4020 North College Street, withdrawing it from the Newburgh Rural Fire Protection District and changing the zoning from Yamhill County AF10 and PAI to Newburgh R1 and I with a stream corridor overlay. I will point out in the ordinance that you have in your packet, it would be page 3 of 58. I would propose, on the recommendation of the mayor, or who pointed out, in paragraph 1, under the City of Newburgh ordains as follows. Paragraph 1, third line, the zoning of the property is changed from Yamhill County AF10 and PAI to Newburgh R1 and I. That should include with a stream corridor overlay in that section of paragraph 1. So I propose that you make that change tonight.
No, I'm referring to the be it as ordained. Hold on just a moment, Brad.
Yes, sir.
Well, it's on page 3 of 58.
If you'd like to see that change, I also have copies that I'd be happy to give you.
Yes, why don't you distribute that and then we'll continue. Yes, yeah, yes. Yes, it's on the third line of that.
So it's the insertion of
Following,
I with the street corner.
yeah, it's inserting after I. With the stream corridor.
It would then read the same as the title of the ordinance.
Thank you. Continue.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Questions for staff? Councilor Johnson?
Good evening and welcome. I don't think I've seen you testify before, so hi.
Hello.
Under the page, I want to say 12. Yep, 12 of 58 in the ordinance. It talks about the transportation planning rule, and I've talked to Mr. Rux a bunch about the transportation issues that intersection of North Valley, Bell, and 219 could potentially face. I know this isn't exactly, obviously the Planning Commission did great work on this, but my question to you is, at what point and how much control is the city going to have over monitoring that intersection and making sure that if upgrades need to be made, what's that process look like?
I don't know what that process would be.
Okay.
Or whether, I know that the development agreement that North Valley Friends Church entered into with the city would require improvements along North College and Bell Road at the time, and you can find the development agreement in the packet as well, as I recall. When improvements are made to the east of the site, then they would be required to make a shoulder, pave a shoulder on their side of the property, or of Bell Road, and then on North College install a curb and gutter at such time as properties across the street develop.
Okay.
But the agreement didn't require any improvements to the intersection. So I'm not sure how, what improvements would be required and how they would be determined in the future.
Thank you. Follow on, Mr. Mayor?
Follow on.
And then with, with this development, are we, in your professional opinion, going to see traffic stopped on North College there like we have at their previous site? Or do you think the current plan they have is going to contain all that pick up and drop off traffic on their site instead of on public streets?
It's not something staff has looked at. Their
Okay.
their permit is from Yamhill County.
Okay.
Bell Road's a county road, and 219, of course, is a
State highway.
state highway. So it's not something staff has had a chance to review.
Okay, thank you.
Any other follow-on, Councilor McKinney?
Does North Valley Road continue to be a county road?
The legal description of this annexation would include the adjacent rights-of-way. So
To
the
the
city
center line.
boundaries would be to the center line of Bell
Okay.
Road. It would continue to be under
As
Yamhill
it
County
tra-
jurisdiction.
As you go from the intersection to the east, it would, that would be the area of improvement that you also spoke of?
Correct.
That shoulder, okay.
Follow on to that. No jurisdictional transfers, though.
None are proposed at this time,
Thank you.
to my knowledge.
Any further questions? Thank you. We have one individual that has signed up that wants to speak to us on this particular agenda item that is a proponent of the annexation, and I'm going to invite Mr. Andy Baker to the table, please. If you'd identify yourself, pushing the button first on the right, and identify yourself, thank you.
Hello, I'm Andy Baker with North Valley Friends Church.
And before you begin, so we don't get you caught up, I'm cautioning you to please keep your remarks to about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't have very much. I'm just here representing North Valley Friends Church and Veritas School. As he alluded to, that there was a 2003 agreement with the city of North Valley to develop our site. It's taken longer than planned with Veritas, but we're at that point. So a part of the agreement was that we would both sign up to annex in to the city of Newburgh, and we filled that out. And Veritas is currently in the process of developing their land, like we've said, in using county permits, because that was agreeable with the development agreement. And they will be, they've brought in the sewer and water lines, and they're in the process of upgrading the pump station to bring water in at the right rate that's needed. And then they have plans in the near future of doing the development of the 2 ball fields that was in the picture. North Valley Friends has no current plans for developing their property. Not that we wouldn't, but, and I'm just available for questions.
Any questions for Mr.
Baker.
Baker? That's right. I thought I had it, and then I thought, oh, I pulled a mental block. None appearing. Thank you very much. Please remain. We may have a question for you later. Thank you. There's no further public testimony. Do we have any written comments that have come in that we do not have?
No, sir, I have not received any for this ordinance.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to close the public testimony portion of the hearing. And I'm going to ask staff to summarize their remarks and have their recommendation.
Thank you. As established in the findings in Exhibit D, the criteria for annexation are met by the applicant, and so the recommendation from the Planning Commission is to adopt the ordinance as written.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions for staff? Councilor Johnson.
And my understanding is that this annexation is below the 40-acre large designation, and that's why it's not being required to have the R3 zoning change. Is that correct?
Staff looked at that. The applicant actually initially proposed R1 and R2 zoning, and that question came up. Is it large, and how much needs to be R3? And rather than wrestle with that question, which we did, the Planning Commission, I guess, advised the applicant to come back with a different sort of request, which they did. So now they're proposing institutional zoning with a 5-acre lot of residential, because the institutional doesn't allow what the agreement was allowed.
Okay.
So hence the residential request, but otherwise it's institutional zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for staff? None appearing. I'm prepared to close the public hearing pending closing remarks of the city attorney.
The applicant has the ability to request 7 days for final written argument. Are you making that request? So under the statute, you can have up to 7 days to submit additional written argument. It cannot be new evidence or facts, but it could be arguing about why the council should adopt this. If you want that additional week, then the council will not deliberate tonight on that. If you waive that, then the council can go to deliberations. Okay, so the applicant indicates they've waived the 7 days. The council is free to deliberate. If the decision is not made tonight, however, and continued to another date, the record could be reopened at that later date by motion of the council. Therefore, do not assume no further evidence will be taken. If the decision is made tonight, the council has the authority to reconsider the decision following proper procedure. This motion to reconsider is usually required to be made at the next meeting of the city council. The fact that the council could reconsider their decision does not affect the length of time for an appeal of that decision. And that's the announcements.
Thank you. You have before you ordinance 2017-2817. This is a first reading. I'm prepared, if you wish, to go for the council to have deliberations and take action, but not without a request to waive the second reading. Councilor Bacon.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we waive the second reading.
Patrick beat you. It's been moved and seconded to waive the second reading. Is there any further discussion?
Why don't we call for the question?
Well, all right, the question has been called for. All in favor of waiving the second reading of ordinance 2017-2817, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. None appearing. It is waived. Councilor McKinney.
Move to approve ordinance number 2017-2817, an ordinance annexing 24.33 acres of property located at 4020 North College Street, tax lots 3208-2700, 2701, 2702, 2703. That was 2701, by the way. 2800, 2801, and 2802, plus the area of adjacent rights of way into the into the Newburgh city limits, withdrawing it from the Newburgh Rural Fire Department District, or Rural Fire Protection District, and change the zoning from Yamhill County AF10 to PAI, to the Newburgh R1 and I, with a stream corridor overlay.
And read by title only.
And read by title only.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt ordinance 2017-2817 and read by title only. Is there any further discussion? The question has been called for. Would you please read the title?
Councilor McKinney did a fine job doing that already, but I'll
That's his
do it again.
prerogative, I guess.
Ordinance number 2017-2817. An ordinance annexing 24.33 acres of property located at 4020 North College Street, tax lots 3208-2700, 2701, 2702, 2703, 2800, 2801, and 2802, plus the area of the adjacent rights-of-way into the Newburgh city limits, withdrawing it from the Newburgh Rural Fire Protection District, and changing the zoning from Yamhill County AF10 and PAI to Newburgh R1 and I with a stream corridor overlay.
It is a roll call vote. Councilor McKinney? It is a roll call vote. City Recorder?
Counselor Johnson? Counselor Murray? Counselor Corey? Counselor McKinney? Counselor Bacon?
Yes.
Counselor Essen? Mayor Andrews?
Yes. Motion passes 7-0-0. And with that, we move to continued business. And under continued business, the first item we have is an ordinance 2017-2815. And this is a continuation of a quasi-judicial hearing. Do we, and I'm asking the city attorney, do we need to go through our announcements again?
We do not, Mayor. We're at the point of council deliberation on this one. The hearing was closed.
We closed the record, and we returned it to staff to bring us back the findings.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Only if the record were reopened would we have to jump through those hoops
Right.
again.
Thank you. So with that, I would like to have the staff give their report.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, councilors. Steve Olson, Planner and Community Development Department. I have a very brief staff report, as we have talked about this one extensively. So at the last meeting, you tentatively moved to approve this annexation, subject to revised findings coming back based on the Planning Commission findings. So that is what we've done. In your ordinance 2017-2815, we basically have incorporated the Planning Commission findings. We made some minor changes for grammar and to add some clarifying statements, such as the city council finds that this criterion is met, that kind of statement. Just to clarify, but the content is what the Planning Commission approved, or recommended, rather. And then just for clarity, we also included the track changes version in case you wanted to see, precisely what language, changed. And that is included in attachment 1. And if you're in this item, attachment 1 starts on page 23 of 36. And the changes are highlighted in red, so you can see what's underlined and what's deleted. So that gives you the actual word-for-word changes. So staff's recommendation would be to approve ordinance 2017-2815 as proposed.
Questions for staff? None appearing? Then the chair is prepared to entertain a motion and have discussion on that motion. Councilor McKinney.
Move to approve ordinance number 2017-2815, and would this be as read?
And read by title only?
And read by title only.
Right.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt ordinance 2017-2815 and read by title only. Discussion.
Call for the question.
I will be favoring this one. I'm glad that we finally walked through it and got a decent product out of it. The question has been called for. Is there any further discussion? None appearing? Would you read by title?
Ordinance number 2017-2815, an ordinance annexing 25.66 acres of property located at 25020, 25240, and 25300 Northeast North Valley Road, Yamhill County Tax Lots 3207-600, 700, and 800, plus the area of the adjacent rights-of-way into the Newburgh city limits, withdrawing it from the Newburgh Rural Fire Protection District, and changing the zoning from Yamhill County AF10 to Newburgh R1 with stream corridor overlay.
This is a roll call vote. City Recorder, please.
Counselor Essen?
Yes.
Counselor Bacon?
Yes.
Counselor McKinney?
Yes.
Counselor Corey?
Yes.
Counselor Murray?
Yes.
Counselor Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Andrews?
Yes. Motion passes 7-0-0. And with that, we move to this is a second reading of ordinance 2017-2813, and this is a legislative hearing, and it is the second reading of ordinance 2017-2813, an ordinance amending the Newburgh Development Code and land divisions. And I'm going to continue to ask, are there any abstentions, conflict of interest, or objections to jurisdiction? None appearing. Let us have the staff report, please, since that's where we got bogged down the last time.
Yes. So good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Councilors. My name is Cheryl Keynes. I'm Associate Planner with the Community Development Department. As the Mayor just stated, at the August 24th meeting, there was a presentation of the staff report outlining the amendments that are proposed. And during that staff report, I also mentioned that there were some comments that were submitted by a citizen who had reviewed the proposed code and had pointed out a couple of errors in the language. And so that's the reason we're back here tonight for the second reading, because those amendments, which was some elimination of some additional language that was put in by mistake under subsection 15100.030, that's been eliminated, and also a correction under subsection 15100.050B10. Both of those corrections have been made to the proposed language, which is included in Exhibit A of your packet, and to the ordinance. And so tonight, I'm just bringing back that amended language, corrected language to you. So that's the conclusion of my staff report.
Questions or comments for staff? None appearing. I have nobody signed up to provide any oral testimony on this. Have we received any further communications?
No, we have not received any.
Thank you. I appreciate that. With that, I'm going to close the oral and written testimony portion of the hearing, and we will have the staff's final comments and recommendation.
No additional comments, just recommendation of passing ordinance 2017-2813, amending the Newburgh Development Code for land divisions as recommended by the Newburgh Planning Commission.
Thank you. You have heard the reports. The chair will entertain a motion if there's no further discussion. Councilor McKinney.
Urge the adoption of ordinance number 2017-2813.
And read by title only.
It's legislative, but we can read it by title only.
Well, it's an ordinance.
Oh, it is an ordinance. It says so right there, XX.
Yes, it is an ordinance.
Well, have somebody read it.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance 2017-2813. Would you read the title, please?
Ordinance number 2017-2813, an ordinance amending the Newburgh Development Code for land divisions.
This is a roll call. It is an ordinance.
I'm sorry, I missed who the second was.
The second?
Yeah,
I didn't. It is seconded. Bacon.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. You bailed me out.
There you go. I'll call for the question.
And the question's been called for, and we've had it read.
Okay, Counselor Johnson? Aye. Counselor Murray?
Yes.
Counselor Corey?
Yes.
Counselor McKinney?
Yes.
Counselor Bacon?
Yes.
Counselor Essen?
Yes.
Mayor Andrews?
Yes. The ordinance passes 7-0-0. And with that, we move to a new business, and this is a resolution 2017-3403. And this is a resolution authorizing the city manager to waive the competitive purchasing requirement and execute all necessary documents to purchase an on-site hydrochloride generation system for the water treatment plant. Whitney Equipment Company, Inc. is the supplier of the microchlor system, and the cost is $277,312.50.
Mr. Mayor, Council.
Staff report, please.
My name is Dan Wilson. I am the superintendent of the water treatment plant. The hyperchloride generation system is the result of a water treatment plant expansion renovation in 2005, where the decision was made to move from gas chlorine to a hyperchlorite system, and then further decision was made to have an on-site generation system as opposed to a delivered product. We currently have a Chlortec hyperchloride generation system. It's reached its end of life. My best description of a hyperchloride generation system is that it's a big battery. It has a cell. We put salt water into it. We hit it with electricity, and it makes chlorine at a 0.8%, which is less than household bleach. And then we store that in tanks, and then we apply it to the raw water to oxidize iron and disinfect the water. This system is 12 years old. It's beginning to fail, and as we move forward, the cost to rebuild and repurpose the thing is relatively the same cost as buying a new system. You see up close, it's full of all of these little nylon clamps, fixtures, spacers to keep the thing apart, and every 6 months, we have to completely take them apart and replace all of these little parts. But that's allowed us to make it run and continue to use it for 12 years as opposed to the 5 to 6 years that it was generally decided its general life expectancy was going to be. This is I had hoped that was going to be a video, but that's okay. This is the system at the wastewater treatment plant that was just installed the last year. It's a microchlor system. The only part of this, the Chlortec system also had the two parts that are on the left of this. The part on the right is the cells. What happens is these cells are there, and it was determined that was the best product to purchase at that time. The Chlortec system is still on the market. The microchlor system is a newer generation of basically the same type of system, and the decision was made through evaluation to purchase the microchlor system for the wastewater plant. Now that we're having to replace the system at the water plant, it's our staff recommendation that we purchase the same system that was purchased at the wastewater treatment plant. I don't know if you can tell or not with these pictures, but these do not have all of the little spacers. These are a sealed unit, and so there's no taking apart, fixing, or repairing. The Chlortec system, if one of those cells were to go bad, the whole system is down. It's completely out of service. With these, if one of these cells go bad, you just take it out and continue to run on the weldings that are still available. So it makes just a little less as opposed to, so you're not, dead in the water. It also has the advantage of being about 85% more energy efficient. The Chlortec system runs at about 1,350 amps when it's in operation. This one runs at about 150. So it's 10 years of advanced in technology. The Chlortec system is still on the market, but this is it's a more advanced system, and it's basically the reason it was chosen to be purchased at the wastewater treatment plant when we went to move on. And that's my recommendation, and that's the resolution, is to allow the city manager to go into purchase the system.
Questions of staff? Councilor Murray?
So if we put in this new system at the water treatment plant, we have the same system at the wastewater treatment plant, we'll be able to share parts and standardize.
That is correct.
So
and the maintenance people will only have to work on one type of system.
Okay.
Which is.
Other questions or comments? Pleasure of the council. Resolution 2017-3403. Councilor Murray?
I propose motion to adopt resolution number 2017-3403. It's a resolution authorizing the city manager to waive the competitive purchasing requirement and execute all necessary documents to purchase an on-site hypochlorite generation system for the water treatment plant. Whitney Equipment Company Incorporated is a supplier of the microchlor system, and the cost is $277,312.50.
It has been moved and seconded. Bacon? To adopt resolution 2017-3403. I will not read the resolution title again. Is there any further discussion? Call for the question. The question has been called for. I hear no further discussion. All in favor of adopting Resolution 2017-3403, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. None appearing. Resolution 2017-3403 is adopted. And with that, I'm going to now move to a discussion of also under new business, of the 2007 ADA Pedestrian Bike Route Improvement Plan Review. And you're doing this one, Cheryl?
Yes, so in my 4 months here, I've learned a lot about the bike and ADA and and pedestrian program. So, so would you like me to just go ahead and do the presentation, or? Okay.
Go ahead.
So, the Newburgh ADA Pedestrian Bike Improvement Plan was adopted in June of 2007. It was put together utilizing a transportation grant, growth management grant in 2005 with a citizen task force that helped develop the plan. And the purpose of it was to basically improve multiple non-vehicular means of travel between key destinations in the city. And so what the plan did was go through and decide what those key destinations were, look at the existing conditions of the improvements between, or the facilities between those destinations, and then start to make recommended improvements, and then design guidelines. And then it also included some ideas about how to implement the plan. And so since that time, some of the improvements that have been made include, there were lots of sidewalk and ADA improvements that were happening between 2007 and 2011, but one of the things that was pointed out was that there weren't a lot of bike improvements that were being made. So in 2011, council directed staff to create a bike improvement plan, a bike improvement program. And so so every year now, there's $5,000 that's budgeted towards that program. And so $5,000 doesn't do a lot for, improvements, but so what staff uses that money for is to look for creative ways to sort of promote bicycle ridership, or also find ways to encourage or make it easier for people to use their bikes or ride their bikes throughout the city. And so some of the ways that they've done that over the years is there were improvements that were made, like Sharrows. Those are the little bicycles on the roads that you see painted in the lanes. And so that just keys people in that it's a shared lane between vehicles and bikes. And so some of those were put in the city, but also there were wayfinding signs in conjunction with Chehalem Parks and Rec District. Wayfinding signs, which you'll find throughout the city, or a lot of them are downtown, that just kind of say, you're here, but in 10 minutes, if you go in this direction, you can get to the library. In 5 minutes, you can get to the cultural center. So those are the wayfinding signs that you'll see throughout the city. And one of the plan also recommended ways to improve these multimodal ways of travel, was to partner with different agencies, and one of those was is to partner with the school district. So in, 2000 and, I can't remember the year, I think it was 2012, the city worked with the school district to put together a Safe Routes to School action plan for Joan Austin Elementary. And so improvements that came out of, that were recommended through that plan, but now have been actually done, are Sharrows and bike lanes near the school. So every year, the Public Works Department continues to do upgrades for ADA to improve facilities, and they use this plan to figure out where do we need those types of improvements? But they also listen to citizen feedback and input on trying to make those improvements, and those are usually done in conjunction with street maintenance projects and with capital improvement projects. So in addition to those, both of those ways of getting upgrades, private development's also required as through the development code to make improvements to bike facilities and sidewalks and ADA ramps whenever they're doing development in the city. So besides just making improvements, the physical improvements, the plan is still utilized on a regular basis to inform other plans. So for example, we recently adopted the revised transportation system plan, and so this document played a key role in that. Pieces of this plan were adopted into the TSP, including showing critical routes and where improvements are needed, and so that fed into the project list that came, the recommended project list. It's in the adopted TSP. This plan helped to inform that. It's a key piece as we move forward with the Riverside District Update. This document will be given to the consultant so they know where the deficiencies are, and as we're moving forward on that. But it also helped us to, in conjunction with the TSP adoption, making modifications to the comprehensive plan to make sure that we promote multimodal transportation throughout the city. So it gets used on a regular basis, even though it is it's 10 years old now. It's still an important document that helps to inform us all in different projects, in different ways. So it's still a vital document. I don't know if there are any, this is just part of a regular update, an annual update that the council has asked for on different plans. Does anyone have any questions on this plan, or?
Councilor McKinney?
What is the potential savings of this $4.9 million if we just took care of curb cuts and not, at this particular point in time, the greater scope of this program? Is there a savings to be realized by just doing the curb cuts and sidewalks rather than some of the other things when we're faced with such a severe cash crunch in some of these? Has anybody asked you that question before? No, and Mr. Harris, the Public Works Director, might have a bit more information, but that $4 million is just part of the capital improvement program, and so these types of improvements are just required as part of those projects, and so I think they're probably a pretty small portion of that, but so I don't know the answer to that question. Who can tell me in the 2017-2018 proposed budget how many of dollars are being used for something other than sidewalks and curb cuts?
I think the best thing to do is for me to
Please
research the
identify
question
yourself.
further to clarify.
Please identify
Jay
yourself.
Harris, Public Works Director.
Thank you.
I need to get the question quantified a little better because we have a very large budget. And if we're talking about utility funds and so on, that gets expensive. If we're just talking about the transportation fund or the street fund, that puts some sideboards on it. But maybe you and I can talk offline about it. To answer your previous question, though, about curb ramps, those ramps are being modified and redone as part of our street preservation projects. So as we're doing, we're required by law to improve these ramps for pavement, when we're doing full scale, like an overlay or grind and inlay, when we're doing slurry seals and just pavement maintenance projects, we're not replacing the ADA ramps. But so those over time are all going to get inherently done with our pavement program. Then you have a couple other elements that you have, like the Villa Road project is a huge connectivity project that's in this plan. That's being done, by Carnes Group as a capital improvement project. We have Elliott Road slated down the road and some others. Some of the missing links, though, of sidewalks are developed properties that are currently developed today, and no sidewalk was put in the 50s or 40s or whenever some of these sites were built. Those seem to be the problem childs out there right now.
Follow on, please.
Follow on then, I have, well, let me do a follow on.
Okay.
The curb cuts that I see on Elliott, what are those? The ones on Elliott and Hayes? And Elliott and whatever the next one is.
Yeah, so we have a street maintenance project going on. Quite a few of those ramps did not meet standard. The current standard has that yellow tactile strip down the bottom of the ramp. And my recollection is a lot of those on that section of Elliott didn't quite conform to the current standard, so they're being replaced. I haven't been out there recently to look at it.
How does that fit into Councilor McKinney's question, though?
Yeah. As a part of the street maintenance projects, we are improving the ADA ramps to connect to the existing sidewalks,
All right, continue.
which are a part of this master plan. So if you flip through the master plan, gosh, I think they identified like 1,500 ramps that needed to be worked on or something in there. Those over time are going to get taken care of. That is on a work plan already. Other elements of the plan, though, still need to be addressed.
You can probably realize, Jay, I'm drilling down. Is there some money to be saved here? Joe's holding his head because he knows I hold his feet to the fire as far as sidewalks are concerned and some other things there. This Fund 18, this street capital improvement, these projects here, that 4.9 million, is there a way to focus those funds so that we do what's necessary? Of course, curb cuts, wheelchairs, some of the other things there. But is there some potential savings to be realized if we focus these plans and narrow them in, to save a little bit of money, but still accomplish our pedestrian and curb cut goals? I'd be glad to meet with you privately here, but that would almost be a recommendation to the staff to find out where can potential savings be realized in this Fund 18.
Thing you. Councilor Edison?
Well, I just want to thank the staff for what is clearly a well-thought-out plan. And it's very encouraging to see those kinds of things being done in the city. It's also amazing to see the amount of work that has to be done. As I've been told in the past, you have a heavy workload, and this doesn't show any different. I think it's great, and I'm sure that you're doing everything you can to get it done as quickly as you can. So I hope that Councilor McKinney's suggestions aren't needed because you're already thinking about all that. But great job.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate it very much. Thank you for the report. And don't let this one get on the shelf and just start collecting dust. We got to keep it going. With that, we move to the next item on our agenda, which is the 2012 Cultural District Master Plan Review. And as we proceed on this one, I do have an individual signed up that would like to share some remarks pertaining to this particular agenda item.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, Councilors. Steve Olson, Planning Division, Community Development Department. So we have a short update for you here. As a reminder, these are information only. Council has asked Planning Division to update you on all of our adopted master plans. So just a point of clarification, we often work on helping get these plans adopted. That doesn't mean the planning staff actually implement these plans, and this one would be a good example. You know, obviously there's multiple players involved on this one. So, but in 2012, the Cultural District Master Plan was adopted by the City Council, Resolution 2012-2998, as the guiding document for future improvements within the cultural district. And council declared the area bounded by East Hancock, North Blaine Street, East Sherman Street, and North School Street to be designated as a cultural district. And just to be clear, that's not a special zoning district, that's just a name. And if you're on this item, on page 2 is a fairly large picture of the master plan. And so just off the top, it's from the Cultural Center, I should say, the full name, Chehalem Cultural Center, the library, the Masonic Lodge, and the public parking lot. So that's essentially the boundaries. So since this plan was adopted, quite a few actions have been undertaken to implement it, including the East Sheridan Festival Street rebuild of the street there, and the Cultural Center forecourt project, putting the pavers in, and quite a bit more than just pavers. The rear entrance to the Cultural Center was developed as part of the ballroom remodel project. The master plan, they developed a wayfinding sign design. There were some bollards installed in North Howard Street to block the street during events and redirect traffic west into the alley. And if you've been to Tunes on Tuesday, you definitely appreciate that. On the east side of the Cultural Center, a splash pad was added to the play open space area. Some bike parking has been added to both the Cultural Center and the library. And then currently under construction now is a patio on the west side of the Cultural Center next to the ballroom. And just recently, the house south of the Masonic Lodge was bought by CPRD, and they are going to be using that as office space. The Newburgh Downtown Coalition is moving into that space. So when you look back to 2012, I think that the groups involved deserve a lot of credit. A lot has been accomplished. I should point out there are many other actions to be done still to implement the plan, and they're actively under consideration by the groups involved. Funding's a primary issue. I think they'd love to move ahead quicker, but that's something that still needs a lot of work. There's no set expiration date on the Cultural District Master Plan. There's no update in progress. Other plans and efforts that this master plan relates to, one of the most obvious ones is on the southern edge along Hancock Street. Obviously, that's ODOT right away. They're proposing some significant improvements to the intersections. So this intersects directly with the downtown improvement plan, which looks at all of downtown, but especially along Hancock and First Street. Both plans will require ODOT approval for any changes we make in the right-of-way. Both will require some significant funding because street improvements are expensive. But both plans really focused on making it easier and safer for people to cross Hancock Street, is making it more pedestrian-friendly. That's probably one of the comments that just comes up in general conversation most often with people, is that Hancock Street is especially unfriendly to pedestrians. So both plans really focus on that. The proposed wayfinding plan also relates to the downtown improvement plan wayfinding plan. Both plans should tie together when they're further developed and implemented. And then the master plan implementation in general will require a good deal of ongoing cooperation between the city, because obviously we own the parking lot and the library and the streets. CPRD, as they own the Chehalem Cultural Center site, well, and now also the small house just south of the Masonic Lodge, and the Chehalem Cultural Center, which actually operates the Cultural Center site. One of the important elements there, the city and CPRD have an intergovernmental agreement for the cultural district. It relates to the management and maintenance of the open space, the outdoor event coordination, and a parking management program. And that last has been in a process of continuing refinement. And I'd say the ongoing refinement of the parking management plan will be essential for managing the growth of the district's activities. The good news is the center seems to be thriving and becoming busier and busier, but that also creates parking challenges. So there's future things that may increase parking demand, such as finishing the theater inside, and there's future options for adding parking around the site. But that is the summary of the master plan and the actions taken to implement it to date. And I think Mr. Suppi has some additional things he wants to share about future options.
Any questions for staff at this time? The city manager and Councilor Essen.
Mayor, can I also add that as you're hearing that, and when Mr. Suppi comes up, and also Leah's here to answer questions, you're scheduled to meet with CPRD at like their next meeting in a work session. This is one possible topic. You're going to have to prioritize what you want to talk to them about, but this could be a topic about vision on both sides, money and all that, so.
Thank you. Councilor Essen?
Well, I just, again, am amazed. This looks like another $6 million project. Is that what it looks like? I'm not sure. I thought I saw that number there. But it's an amazing project, and when we get through, it's going to be a wonderful downtown. I'm thinking that, again, you guys, I spend a lot of time complaining, so every time I get a chance to throw a attaboy in there, it looks like you guys are doing a fantastic job.
I'd say thanks, but I have to point out that, our role we play is we help assemble these and bring them to you, but frankly, it's the groups involved that really did the work putting this together, and we just kind of helped shepherd it through the process here, but we do help implement it as projects take place, but I wouldn't give us a primary role at all, so.
All in one?
All in one?
That makes it even harder.
Councilor Johnson?
I did have a couple comments and a question for you. I've been brought up to speed a little bit on the parking issues surrounding the cultural district, and mostly just wanted to let staff know that having read through this plan, because I hadn't actually had this plan in front of me before, we have a lot of plans to read. I am really excited about what this could become and how it could mesh into the downtown master plan. I think that's really cool. What I'm most concerned about, though, is parking and how those issues are addressed. I'll just be honest and share. I know people from my neighborhood don't go down to Tunes on Tuesday or some of the things down there because they don't know where to park, and they don't want to end up parking somewhere they're not supposed to, or it's a hassle. And so, that's the only comment I would give back, is that if there's one weak spot here for me, it looks like the parking is it. So that's just the only thing, and that also, as another caveat, as a first blush of the plan and not having been involved with putting it together, just you guys kind of comment.
We'll excuse you for a minute, and we'll ask Mr. Suppi if he would come forward. And I don't need to remind Mr. Suppi about the 5-minute limit. And,
Good evening.
Please identify yourself.
My name's Robert Suppi, and as always, thank you. But tonight I come to you before you as the chair of the Newburgh Cultural District Board, not as just a citizen. And Steve did a great job. He attended our last board meeting, and we talked a lot about this plan and what's been accomplished. And he did a great job summarizing that, but I just wanted to add a couple points here. Councilor Essen, you asked about the scope of the project. The numbers that Leah came up with in July, basically $9 million for the whole thing, but $3.5 million of it's been accomplished. Now, I can't say the board did that. We have no money. We organize, we direct, try to make things, but we don't accomplish these big projects. But, we try to see that stuff happens. The second one to Councilor Johnson, if you haven't seen it, I can send you the parking management plans that we have about this, and you can at least see what the framework is.
Parking management plan, how many blocks does it encompass now, Robert?
Basically, the concept, the goal of the parking management plan has changed since the beginning. The basic idea is we have areas we want people to park, which is not the neighborhood, and we have areas we don't want them to park, which is the neighborhood. If you want to have an event outdoors and it exceeds the capacity of the areas we want, you got to have a plan. The truth, though, is where it has evolved to now is if you're a neighbor and you don't want people parking in front of your property, you can get signs that you put out and you get to reserve those. And as you park your cars, you move the signs or take them down and you get to park in front of your house. And the thing to remember in all of this is this all came about because when CPRD got their Phase 2 approval, they didn't have adequate parking. So that was the agreement, is that we would have this plan.
And that's working. It's not working.
No. That's a matter of opinion and what your standards are. The standard of, do neighbors get, neighbors can get the signs. This last season, we had 9 neighbors getting the signs, and if that's the standard, it's working wonderfully. But there's quite a lot of parking going on in the neighborhood, and if you're interested, I can give you numbers. But
So quickly, it's 2 or 3 blocks to the north, east, south, and west?
when I've gone out personally and counted cars during the event and afterwards, and I'll go as many blocks as seem to be getting impacted. It's impacted all the way to Edwards, and actually to 1 street past Edwards. I mean, it's gone pretty far, but one attitude is those roads are there with public parking, people can park there. Another attitude is no, people, should have access to their neighborhoods. But I can give you the fact. I'll email you the facts, and
thanks.
You decide, what if there are issues there. There were 2 other things I wanted to add, just that Steve didn't get in his, about things that have been accomplished or a little different than the plan. In area G1 over by the splash pad, the Early Birds Rotary has been very generous, and they've offered to construct a shade structure. And we've worked with them because we have to approve all this outdoor stuff. We've worked with them. We had one meeting where we walked outside, walked off where the posts would be and what direction it was going to face and all of that, and how it's going to look like it's going to match some of the design of the cultural center, so it doesn't look like this odd structure just sitting out there, but also being aware that this is a donation and you don't want to be pushing somebody too hard that wants to build something and give it to you. And I think what we came up with sounded really good to everybody. It's moving along. They're working on some technical issues, but I believe that's going to get constructed, and I think it'll be a big benefit, because one of the complaints people have had is when they're over by the splash pad, there's no shade. And gee, you use the splash pad when it's really hot out. So, the parents want to sit in the shade as they watch their kids running around in the water. So that's something that's coming. The other one that I do think is important, especially since we talked about parking, the area E3, the south, just immediately west and to the south side of the cultural center. In the plan, it's shown as kind of a garden, and they talked about a bocce court and so on. When the plan was adopted, it was a gravel parking lot. When Park and Rec got the Phase 2 approval, although the city wanted the gravel lot to go away, they agreed to let it stay because of the lack of parking. We don't make these decisions, but we've discussed it at length, and the overall feeling seems to be we would like to see parking remain there, but possibly as a multi-use thing, something that's got pavers or something, so that it's not an ugly gravel parking lot, but parking can happen there when needed. And again, we don't make official decisions on that by itself, but that's been a very significant topic of discussion, and you can expect that it'll come up as further development plans come in for the cultural center. But other than that, somebody's got a whole lot of money. We've got lots of plans we'd like to implement.
follow on?
Your goal for E3 is the same goal that you have for E2 there at the end of the ballroom?
Well, keep in mind, the east side of
They need
E2.
access in and out of there for vehicles and other
E2
things.
is now a patio. That's what
Yeah.
they mentioned is just being completed or has completed. We don't actually set the goal, so it's hard for me to say, but the general feeling I think I can say amongst the board is we would like to keep E3 available for parking of vehicles when needed, because there is a real need for it.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you for your comments and update. I appreciate it very much. Steve?
All right. Steve Olson, Planning Division. Nothing further to add, but if you have any questions, I'm here.
Any further questions or comments regarding the Cultural District Master Plan? None appearing? Thank you. We appreciate it. Good update. The next item we have is a communication plan, an information report on our communication plan. And I believe, Rosa, you're taking this one?
Mayor, members of the council, good evening. My name is Rosa Olivares. I'm the community engagement specialist here at the city of Newburgh, obviously. I'm here to discuss with you the community engagement activities so far as it relates to the council's visioning process and the strategic goals. So let me see, So I will just briefly go over the activities and then move on to accomplishments, and then share with you some insights, some statistics that I found really interesting in getting to know more about the community here in Newburgh and what kinds of stories and informations that they like, and also finally discuss the communication plan and asking for your feedback in regards to the draft. So as you see on the summary of the request for council action, I've been busy working with departments, with various departments and their projects, generating, doing brochures, posters, updating those, as well as generating new ones, and helping get the word out about their projects. For example, like the E-Track It system that the engineering department and various other departments have did. Also with Public Works, helping them get the word out in regards to the road closures and the maintenance works that they're doing throughout the city. Also working with the team for the transportation utility fee, finding ways of how to better post or publicize the information about the transportation utility fee. One of my largest projects has been evaluating the website for its usability. If you go one or more than 3 clicks looking for information, I think we need to look at that usability, and that I've been chipping away at it very slowly, working with departments to see how they're managing their content and how we can work together in making sure that the information is more easily available. So working with them, so far I've worked with the Public Works Department to come up with a process for them to post that information, and also with the Finance Department. I've worked with them in making the content for the utility billing more readable and easy to go to and click, which is actually in the draft right now. Let's see, what else? Also conducted some training with new website editors and invited others from the city who edit information, and gave them some tips as to key content and design concepts, because it is an art in publishing information on the website. If you have too much information, people will lose interest and will not even look at the information. So working with them and understanding those key concepts is something I've been doing. Also, as part of my activities, I formed part of the Newburgh-Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue Publication Information team, which I have learned so much from being part of that process. Through that process, I've been able to speak to community members and ask them, how do you get your information? You know, how can we reach to you? And here's a story where one of the community members gave me an idea, which I don't know why I didn't think about it before, about putting the construction signs, the digital signs announcing the town hall. And we did that, and when I talked to the community member, they were so pleased that we had listened to them, or that, you know, for promoting town halls. So that was an interesting story that I wanted to share with you. Let's see. And then I've been managing the social media content on the city's website, the city's Facebook page. And I will go more into details as to the statistics, but it has been an effective tool in getting the word out to the community. I'm not saying that it's the only tool that we should be using, but it has been effective in getting traffic to our website and getting people more aware of the information out there. Let's see. And I've connected with local organizations through the projects, and one example is community organizations are more aware of my position, of the community engagement position, and so they contact me sometimes, like for example with the cooling centers, of, you know, creating that list was a collaborative effort with the community. They reached out to me and said, hey Rosa, do you know, are there any cooling centers out there? I'm like, I don't know, but let's put a list together and put it on the website, promoted it, and has been very effective in getting the word out. I have yet to reach more business leaders, which is something that I need to work on more, to connect with them and see what are their needs, their information needs, and how we can work together. So this is kind of to show you what I have accomplished as the community engagement. And one of these is as you can see there, it's a snapshot of the TBFNR page where we have compiled that information of what's been happening with the TBFNR annexation issue. So people can come to this website and read all of it. Also, through the whole process of getting community input, community information, we created a dedicated line where the community can call in and record their messages. So that is a dedicated line that we listened to constantly when they were coming in. And as you can see there on your left, there is the draft, the unpublished page for the utility billing. Now it will be easier to, if you have a question regarding when do I pay it, how do I pay it, you just click on that particular information. Also, is there a program that can help me pay with part of that, of the utility bill or the municipal services statement, and they can just go right to the information that they need. Right, currently it's under review by the finance department, so as soon as it's approved, you know, we can publish it and go live with it. On the right side, you see the calendar Well, before, I don't know if you had noticed that the calendar, it was just library events. I don't know if you all, now the Public Works Department is using it. They figured it out. We figured out together to post information about what's going on with the streets, the roads. So this is one place where people could come in and say, oh, what's going on today? And what's the city doing today? They can go there, check it out. And you may see that this is mainly revolving around the website, but nowadays people, that's where they go to. They want to find some information, they search it up on the internet, and we better have that information easily available and easy to read. And here you see the council roundup. The city recorder had previously published them online, but what would happen is, like, every time a meeting came up, it was replaced, right? So we came up with an idea, what if we don't replace it? What if we just leave it where the council meeting is, and we can just leave it there permanently for historical purposes, and also if you want to do a search on our website, you can say, oh, TBFNR annexation. It'll come up with where those meeting dates were. So they're now living permanently on the city council's meeting date. We've also began on.
You're doing away with the roundup?
No, we're still publishing them, but they're on like, for example, today's meeting. The roundup will be posted on today's meeting page rather than on a separate page and then being replaced as meetings come up.
And where do you find that?
On the calendar, on the agendas and meetings, and then you just click on the date and that you want to see, and you'll find those the council roundups. And we also try to post them on our Facebook page, right? For those that go to their Facebook and use it as a feed, as a news feed, they can go there and look at, what happened on the last city council's meeting. And just wanted to show off those pages to you. One on the left is a post that we published for how Newburgh was preparing for the eclipse, and that was one of the posts that got the most views or reach a lot more people, about 7,000 plus people. And then on the right, you'll see the Cooling Center website where the community collaborated to have that information available. And here are the popular, also what's very popular in regards to what the community is wanting to know is what's going on with the streets. And here are the posts on our social media regarding that with images. Definitely, the people love images. So next is the information tools that I use, and then some of the business intelligence or statistics, in other words, that that is interesting. And just to brush up on who is Newburgh, our population is 23,465. This is according to the PSU's Population Center, and as you can see there, the median age is 39. And this is the composition of race here in and ethnicity here in Newburgh. As you can see, the largest minority is the Hispanic Latino population with 13.53% being. Let's see. And an interesting fact too is that the population with limited English speaking households that are 18 years and older is 4.43%. So it is important too that we try to also reach out to that community that cannot read in English or speak in English. So here are some interesting facts from Facebook that, and I'm comparing the same timestamp snapshot from August through September 2016 and 2017, and we had 1,273 likes, and now we have 1,500 likes, and it's been in let me see, I did the math here. It's an 18% increase since from a year ago. And why is that? It's because we're using Facebook a lot more. A lot more people are getting to know that they can come to our social media site and get an idea of what's going on in the city. On a daily average, we're reaching about 1,400 people on Facebook, and this is unique visitors. What does that mean? Is that there's no duplicates, right? It's unique. One person gets counted once. So that's where that number comes from. And the engagement is basically what people are talking about when they're sharing it, when they're clicking on our post. You know, we have an average of 95 people opening our links and all that. And if we take a look at the Facebook demographics, the average age range is between 35 and 55, which correlates with the average age of Newburgh population, the Newburgh's population, which is 39. And so we are definitely reaching that population. And as you can see, most of them are females, very active on Facebook. And another site that I use, or tools that I use, is the Google Analytics, and they analyze the data from our website. And I can see that, you know, using our social media also has helped increase visitors or attract more visitors to our page. And as you can see, the percentages correlate with that. And the second source of visitors is when people go to Google and they do a Google search, and then that's where they go to our pages, our links. And the majority of the people come from Facebook. And this is how many people within the last month has visited our site, which is about 17,000. And on your right-hand side is the top 10 pages that people go to. So they're mainly interested in the library, obviously the hot topics like the clips, definitely paying their water bill is something that they go to. Lately, jobs, since we've promoted quite a few jobs through our social media. Let's see. And construction work, you know, what's going on in the city. They're interested in what's going on in the city, and definitely the bypass. Let's see. So moving on to the communications plan. So one of my questions is, you know, does it align with the council visioning? And definitely looking for feedback on that. So by talking to some of you, getting some idea what your vision was that you wanted the community engagement specialist to do, these are some of the goals that that stood out. And definitely engaging the community is a priority, making sure that they're getting the information that they need. And there are several sources for them to get their information. And definitely ensure a positive image with all stakeholders. Ensure consistent and proactive external communication, definitely, and as well as improve the internal communications with our staff so that they're better informed for them to also answer the questions of the community. And opening a two-way communication with throughout the community. So here are some action items that I would like to highlight from the communication plan. And one of them is creating outreach plans that are unique to our community for certain community populations, for example, the Spanish-speaking community. Also people that are not online. So how could we reach the people that are not online, that are not on Facebook? How do we reach the seniors and college students that sometimes are not, they concentrate on the college but do not come out to the community as much. Another one that throughout my time working is creating policy statements regarding the content management, which would definitely help with organizing the information, making sure that the information online is usable and easily reachable, including emergency communications protocols. What are those key messages that we're going to send out when an emergency happens, etc. And also continue getting information out, publishing news releases that highlight what the city is doing, what it has accomplished, its initiatives, etc. And all these can be done in different platforms, like Joe mentioned, through videos, YouTube videos, through town hall meetings, through presentations at different organizations and clubs, etc. So, this concludes my presentation. So, Mayor, send it back to you if anyone has any questions.
Questions or comments for Rosa on our communications plan and our community outreach? Councilor McKinney.
I'm impressed. Thank you. You haven't let any grass grow under your feet. The statistical data that you've been able to glean and share, I think, is very important. And I'm glad you work for us.
Councilor Johnson?
Rosa, really appreciated the plan and read through it. It was great. Also appreciate the fact that you reached out to me and asked for some advice, and I appreciate that as well. The one thing I want to tell you is that I think the city of Newburgh is so lucky to have someone like you that's bilingual, that can reach out to some of those different communities and be someone that can be the face of Newburgh for folks like me who don't speak Spanish and can't really communicate. So keep up the great work, and you're starting from scratch. And so I just urge everyone on City Council to give her an opportunity to continue to build a communication plan and a communication program that really didn't exist before she got here. And we're actually focusing on things to reach out and talk to folks. And I'm really excited about that. And you have a really good foundation here. So keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa.
Thank you all.
You've even helped the poor old mayor in putting a breath of fresh new life in some of the things that I'm having to meet the public with. And I thank you. I appreciate your insights very much. Anything else?
We have a recess.
Is that for Rosa to decide?
That's for you to decide, buddy. You're the boss.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
5-minute recess. 5 minutes. We are reconvening and we are moving to council business. And the first item on there is, our city manager mentioned it earlier, and he sent out an email to you all today. I don't know whether you got it or not, or whether you found it or not. And he is interested in a short discussion on items that you all would like to have as items to be discussed in a joint city CPRD meeting. Do you have a copy of those? Oh, my goodness.
So there's,
Joe, I'll let you take the
okay,
lead on this.
so there's two emails that you got today. One is on the one coming up at the next meeting, which is CPRD, and the one after that is the school district. And like, you saw how much time it took for tonight with just doing the budget stuff. You have an hour. Some of you haven't met the members of each of these, so I'm hoping this is the first of more than one meeting with both the groups. We haven't met with the school district in over 20 years, I think, is what somebody said.
Well, follow on. When did you send the one out on the school district?
Yeah, just a little while. Yeah. So,
Oh, okay.
and these
I
are
didn't get
just
that one.
some ideas and stuff, and just talking to some staff and them. What I told CPRD is, if we can pick two topics and they pick two topics, then we have 4 topics to talk about, 10, 15 minutes each. And so one that I would strongly suggest you heard tonight, both because of financing and because vision. And so, like, if you didn't get a chance to read all of the cultural district plan, read it, because there's us and the CPRD and the cultural district board, and then the citizen committee with some staff. That's it for giving input into it. So if we're to have some things go down the road there, it would be really useful. So that's one I would strongly suggest. And then with them, CPRD wanted to come in to you and ask for approval of a trail master plan. This was before all the SDC issues and all that. And I said, not until you've presented something to council. So that might be something you want to talk about, of how this whole concept of trails, how does that affect the city? How does CPRD fit into it? Because they have an area much greater. But if there's other issues, if you'd bring those, tell me what you'd like and we'll add it. With the school district, I mean, obviously we care about the kids, but we have some interactions. You heard the stuff about resource officers tonight, suicide prevention. While it's not something we're specifically responsible for, we're responsible for responding, and it's a community issue, and I need to know, is that something that you want to worry about? There's stuff like fiber. We're working on fiber. We'll talk about council goals next time of how high it is on your priority for economic development and all that. Well, the school district has a plan which they're implementing of having a device in every kid's hands by June. Well, some of the kids go home and they don't have a way of getting onto the internet. And so, is that something you want to be working with them? So, I sent you some ideas, nothing magic. If you have something, get it back and then we'll give it to them. We're going to finalize the one I would ask you, like tomorrow, the CPRD one, so I can get that finalized with them.
I have a question.
Just send you some things.
Just send me, yeah.
Councilor McKinney?
Does the trail discussion, does that end in an IGA? Or is it
You
even
heard
progressed that
tonight,
far?
we had a pedestrian, the bikeway plan. Trails are in our comp plan.
Yeah.
Trails are in that plan to an extent. And there was a proposal 2 years ago that we got to be a finalist, that the mayor, I don't know how many other people were pushing, but a grant request to the COG, which then went to the state for a trail system on Hess Creek. And it was basically going from Hoover Park down to the waterfront. That missed by, we were the next one to be funded. So that would have ended up in an IGA we were a co-applicant for that, so.
Did you get what you needed on that one?
If you have ideas, please send them to me. If you don't, I'm going to submit what I sent to you.
I have one, and it's more of an announcement. It's been some time since we've reviewed it, and I'd like to have I'm actually creating a subcommittee of the council to begin to look at and make recommendations to the council and the time frame that I'd like to have is those recommendations come to the council in January of 2018, and that's a subcommittee on council rules. And that subcommittee is myself, Councilor Johnson, and Councilor Essen. Any objections to that on the part of Councilor Johnson or Councilor Essen?
Absolutely not.
Councilor Johnson will be the subcommittee chair, and his schedule is probably most difficult, and so we'll kind of build it around his schedule, and we will talk more on getting the first meeting, and those will be public meetings, because we are an advisory body to the city, so those will be public meetings. We don't make a final decision. We are making recommendations. We're not a quorum in that particular case. So thank you for your willingness to do that. And then it was brought to my attention, I knew a little bit about it, but I don't know all the details, but I think we're having to say sayonara to Aaron tonight. I understand that you're moving on. This is the last time you're going to be here and share our happy abode till midnight on many evenings.
Yes, this is the last.
Do you have, where are you going?
I am going to, it's a company that basically writes HR information for other companies.
Okay.
So no journalism at this point.
Well, thank you for your time that you've spent with us, and we appreciate it. You're being in contact with all of us. That is very important, and thank you for that. We appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor,
Stephen, you had an item that you wanted to bring up?
I had an item in the
You
packet.
didn't tell me earlier.
It was on the agenda. It's the elected build officials day for Habitat for Humanity. Erica Pagel had contacted me, so I just put the flyer in the packet. And
Oh,
if
you didn't. Not in my packet, but that's okay. Here it is. No, that's fine. I understand what she's talking about. Go ahead.
So it is on Saturday, September 16th, and the details are on the flyer in the packet. And if you want to commit, if you could let Erica know soon, they will provide lunch, and you do not have to come for the whole day. It's when they will have elected officials from Dundee, Sherwood, Dayton, St. Paul, and Newburgh all build on a house that day. So if you have any questions, Erica's contact information is on the flyer.
All right, thank you. That did not get in my packet. For whatever reason, it didn't get in there. Councilor McKinney.
Council, with the completion of our board now, I would like to move that we suspend the council rules in order to reconsider the council's motion to support a charter amendment. And that's what I can say at this particular point in time.
A little clarification, if I may. Councilor McKinney is referring to our Rule 7.7, which is reconsideration. When a question has been decided, it will be in order for a member who voted on the prevailing side to move for reconsideration at the same meeting or the next following meeting only. And Councilor McKinney is asking for a suspension of the rules. Are you the entire rule, or is there a particular part of the rule?
I think it was just the rule in general, wasn't it?
I'm asking you. It's your motion.
It was, Truman and I tried to brief each other earlier in the meeting, but is there a certain portion of the rule that it falls under, Truman, or is it just for the reconsideration of the council's proposal to?
Well, there are two pieces to the rule.
Okay.
And I think that's my question. Is it the suspension of the entire rule, or is it the suspension of the time limit, or is it the suspension of who makes the request, or is it both?
Suspension of the entire rule.
That's what you want to do?
Yes.
All right. And when we have this suspension, one of the things that come about in parliamentary rules, a suspension of the rules requires a two-thirds majority of the council. And as I understand, that two-thirds majority would constitute 5 members. Is that correct, City Attorney?
That's correct. This is under Robert's rules, this is a motion that requires a second that's non-debatable and requires a two-thirds affirmative vote to pass.
Very good. I'm going to honor your motion on this, but when I do that, it's no way in indicating whether I do or I do not endorse the process. It has been moved that we suspend rule number 7.7 reconsideration in its entirety. Do I hear a second?
Yes, as long as we've gotten the approval from the city attorney. That was my only question, what we had the discussion on, so I will second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded that we suspend the rules for reconsideration, both by who may request it and that we suspend it as far as the time limit that requires a two-thirds majority. May I have a roll call, please?
Councilor Essen? No. Councilor Bacon?
No.
Councilor McKinney?
Yes.
Councilor Corey?
Yes.
Councilor Murray?
No.
Councilor Johnson? No. Mayor Andrews?
No.
7-2. Or,
Motion
sorry,
does
5-2.
not succeed by 5-2. Is there further business to come before the council? I think that answered Mr. Seppi's question. Mr. Seppi had signed up if there were to be further discussion. Anything further to come before the council?
Motion to adjourn.
It's been moved to adjourn. We are adjourned.
It's all in here. It's your name.